Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, proud partner and supporter of the Republic of Ireland women's national football team.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. And remember that Football and Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. You can text us 53106. Tweet us at Off the Ball. Listen on News Talk. Watch us on the Off the Ball digital and social channels for Periscope on Twitter at Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook and on the OTB Sports app. We're joined by the Republic of Ireland and Liverpool legend Mark Lawrenson, the football correspondent of the Irish Independent Dan McDonnell and the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward to talk about the beautiful game. Mark, we'll start with you on Man United and Everton, a 1-1 draw. So Anthony Martial put United in front in the first half. Ronaldo and Pogba were rested. Ronaldo and Pogba eventually came on, and then Andros Townsend equalised in the second half. So what did you make of it all, Mark?
I thought Everton were excellent. I really did. They deserved the goal. I think it arguably was the best piece of play in the game. And the thing with Manchester United, you just don't know from one performance to the next the way they're going to compete. Strange, John, at the moment. There's no real set pattern of play. You look at the other teams at the top of the league and they go, yeah, you're playing a definitive way. You know what Liverpool will do. You know what Chelsea will do. You know also as well what Manchester City will do. But you look at Manchester United and it's a bit like, so Ole Gunnar Solskjaer picks what he thinks is his best 11 players for the day. He sends them out to play. But as I say, there just seems to be no rhyme or reason as to where they play. It's give the ball to one of the players who's outstanding and let him do something with the ball. It's very, very strange at the moment. And I think tomorrow, one or two of the journos, I think they'll be chasing Ole Gunnar Solskjaer a little bit.
It's not title-winning form, is it, Mark? Because they brought in Ronaldo, Sancho and Varane to win the title. 1 point from the last 6 at home. And also, like during the week, they got lucky.
Oh, they got lucky. But you know what? You can only win from that position, which is obviously a feather in the cap. The thing is, I think the last, never a big stats man, but I think the last 8 Premier League games at home, they've conceded 1 goal or at least 1 goal, which is, again, something else, which means, quite blatantly obvious, you're going to have to score 2 to win a match, which is not the fortress that Manchester United used to have. I mean, you got a corner, you did a lap of honour, it was like pressure. And I just think at the moment, everybody's looking at the manager and saying, okay, come on, you've got all these, well, you could say outstanding, world-class players, good players, very good players. But again, there seems to be no real pattern how they actually play. So that's why I think he'll get a little bit of stick from all the journos over here, definitely.
Is he getting a stick from the fans, I wonder? 53106 listeners, Manchester United fans, love to actually hear your opinion on how this is going, because you're meant to challenge for the title. The excuses are beginning to run out and the performances have been patchy. You can't argue with that now. Benitez does get Everton organised and you can't argue with that. But Johnny, I'm thinking to myself, if Man City play Everton and Villa at home, they win.
Yeah, and it wasn't particularly unpredictable that Everton would cause them problems, JD. Benitez has them very, very well set up. It was a classic counter-attack goal. I think what's his point for Man United today is that they were probably a little bit lucky to go ahead in the first half. It was a very, very good goal, in fairness, Martial. A little bit of luck, but it was a good goal. But what was disappointing is if you go in 1-0 at half time in a game in which you haven't really played well against, in fairness, Everton are still a limited enough team. You kind of got to just seal the deal there, and they didn't. And in fact, I thought Mina had a goal disallowed at the end when Davies basically was through, and he either should have shot or Mina should have just stayed on side. When Davies was put through, that was the pass that basically broke the Man United defence, and they should have scored from that position. They messed that up. So arguably Man United were actually lucky to get a point today. And Paul Pogba, I mean, you just look at him today, JD, and it's a lot of stuff we've seen before where he's gone into his shell again. He did not play well at all. I'd agree with what Laura said. That it was, we spoke about this in the last day when they played that to McTominay and Fred. They don't create an awful lot, and they are kind of reliant on their strikers, their marquee strikers, to do something. Cavani didn't have a great game. Ronaldo came on and did okay, but I mean, you'd be at a push to say Everton were really stretched. And having looked at the other teams, Man United are already out of the title race, you'd have to say, the way they're playing. They don't look nearly good enough to be sort of run-of-the-mill teams week in, week out. And Everton will probably feel disappointed they didn't win the game. And that's where Man United are at the moment.
Dan, you were on Ronaldo watch today.
Well, I know I wasn't on Ronaldo watch, but I think BT were on Ronaldo watch. You covered the game, and this is the thing with the power of the personality of Ronaldo, that it can add to the story very easily. That, I mean, at full time, if he walks off, if any other player maybe walks off at full time and walks down the tunnel quickly, it's not necessarily a big deal. But Ronaldo walks off shaking his head, and straight away, this becomes the centerpiece of a post-match analysis, and it leads you to sort of speculate. Well, why is it? Is he unhappy he didn't start? He might just be annoyed that they had a couple of opportunities later on that they fluffed. Maybe that there was opportunities that cut off attacks at source for the goal they didn't take. But that's the thing about Ronaldo and his overpowering presence, that it will be analysed possibly to an unfair level, possibly to an extent that it sort of exaggerates a situation. But I know then afterwards you're listening to sort of the people in the studio saying, well, Ronaldo's used to winning trophies, he's used to winning things, and what he's seeing here isn't good enough, and that adds to it. But it is actually interesting to hear Lauro talking about the sort of lack of real pattern to Manchester United's play, because you want to hear the ex-players on that to maybe fill in the gaps that maybe people couldn't see. And I must admit, in the second half, I was sort of trying to watch it going, well, what is there something that's particularly wrong here? Some system failure or some particular issue? But it was just an overall sort of, I don't know, an overall sort of lack of inspiration or cohesion in terms of how they played. And it is so true that they're just relying on individual brilliance. And I mean, it could have happened. I mean, Sancho had one little 1-2 with Ronaldo. Ronaldo could have scored. One or two other little episodes like that as well, where like super players pulled them out of a hole. But I mean, they got away with one during the week because Ronaldo just produces something late, but they can't keep getting away with one. And you look at their fixtures coming up, it's quite difficult. And they can't maintain that level. I mean, I don't think they're going to win the title. I don't know if you can say, Johnny, they're out in the title race. I mean, in theory, they're level on points at the top of the table at the moment. I know where you're coming from, that it's unlikely, and I agree with you. But actually, I mean, if they got themselves together with the players they have, they could still be competitive, but it just doesn't look likely.
Well, let's hear now from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. He was speaking to BT after the game, the 1-1 draw.
What went wrong today?
Well, parts of it was really good. I thought we started well, high energy, created some good openings and scored a fantastic goal coming into half-time, 1-0. You're pleased. Second half, we lacked that cutting edge to get the second, which is vital in a game like this, because from a corner that we have, you concede 5 seconds later, or so that was a disappointing bit.
Do you think you're playing with too much risk in that situation? Is it too open?
No. We weren't too open. We had enough players behind the ball, and but we didn't deal with the ball when with the tackles when we should have had. So, and a good goal by them, but when the counter on one side, the finish is going to happen from the other side. So we just didn't regroup and reorganise well enough.
Bruno was saying that the tempo slowed a little in the second half, and that enabled Everton to get back into the game.
Well, we gave them a few counter-attacks. I don't know the stats. I know that we have the ball most of the time. They didn't play through us at all, really. They counter-attacked, and that was the same on Wednesday night. We need to be better at call it when to risk it, when to how not to be a counter-attack. I think that's the key lesson today, because they do create big chances on the quick breaks.
On the plus side, Anthony Martial got a goal, first in 8 months.
Yeah, Anthony did well. Could have had 1 or 2 more, of course. Back post header. Could have been back stick there. Very good goal, by the way. How we played and switched the play, and that was the intention second half as well. But you just couldn't get the cutting edge.
Well, you need the clean sheet as well. Is that what you're going to work on now? Is that the project?
We don't concede many chances today, but we conceded a goal. So sometimes, as I said, we had to deal with 1 or 2 moments, and we didn't in that break and the counter attack, and we got out muscled. So we should have cleared it, of course. But that's in every game in the Premier League. You can work all day long on system and that defending, but it has to be dealt with there and then.
Thanks, Ollie.
Thank you. Cheers.
They dominated the football, but 1-1, that's all that matters?
Yeah, it's the result. It's the final result. I mean, they dominated the ball, had a high percentage, but at the same time... United had 13 shots.
Bring in the panel here on that, just BT, the reaction to the Manchester United and Everton draw, 1-1 draw in the Premier League. Mark Lawrenson, are you convinced by what Solskjaer says after press conferences that there's progress being made here? Because the inconsistency, as you pointed to, is a bit worrying.
I don't listen to every one of his press conferences, John, in all honesty, but obviously I listen to that. I mean, you should never ever concede a goal that particular way, because you should always have an extra man at the back, and you should obviously have somebody sat in front of whoever the other guy's marking to get onto the ball first and restart the attack. But I just have this thing with them, which is they are actually, which sounds crazy for some of the players here, they are a little bit negative with these two central midfield players in there, and I'm not really sure what they do. Generally McTominay and Fred, obviously. And I just think with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he's very much reluctant to criticise his players. I get that a little bit, because that's the world that we live in, and, you know, the agents will come crying in, and you bollock my player, and all those kind of things. But occasionally, you've got to do it. And I just feel, I mean, he's a great lad, he's a fantastic bloke and everything, but then that's the end of the sentence, isn't it? And you don't kind of say, you know, he's done really well with Manchester United, and I love the way they play tactically, and his substitutions are outstanding and all those kind of things. It's almost like he sends his players out, and whatever happens, happens. And it's not as though he tries to change it. It'll be, well, you know, because this was this and that was that and one thing or the other. And the idea is to win games, and by hook or by crook, you win them. And end of the match, then you have a look. And, you know, you may maybe go and analyse it next day, day after, all those kind of things. But you just have to win a game. It was a game that really they should win against Everton. As well as organisers, Benitez's teams always are and always will be. That was a game for Manchester United to win. And I think you said, I don't know if it was to Johnny or Dan at the top of the programme, saying that, you know, City would beat those kind of teams at home easily. I would think Liverpool will. And I would think Chelsea will. And I think therein lies the problem. I just feel with Ollie he's just trying to be a really nice person to everybody. You can't be if you're a manager. Look at Fergie. You know, some of the stories you hear about Fergie are amazing. But what did he do? He got players playing. He left them out if he didn't think they were at it, and he won an unbelievable number of competitions and trophies. That's the complete difference. And I know it's a big comparison, but I think the guys can see where I'm going with this.
The pressure will come on them a bit now, because just their last sort of 4 or 5 games, generally they've not played well and they lack cohesion. And we did speak about this when Ronaldo signed, and I know Joe Malloy was very, very strong on this, that, you know, it could cost Ole his job, because if it goes wrong, it's on his head, be it really, when he brought Ronaldo in. And he was probably right not to start him today. And I wouldn't read too much into Ronaldo's kind of strut when he came off, because, like, it's all the focus is on him. But, you know, you do look at them today, and it's just like the Pogba performance today. Like, I don't know, Laura, how do you explain something as listless as that when? Well, he came on only late on. He looks.
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, it's not what does Pogba do? He doesn't like playing in that system. That's the first thing, and he makes that blatantly obvious. And he might have 2 or 3 games where he's outstanding. Then he disappears. But he's done this. Wherever he's been, it's only in the French national team where we've really looked and thought, wow, what a player. But wherever else he's gone, he's just always done this. The world and his wife knows at the end of the season, he'll be off. His agent, obviously his contract's up, so he won't sign a new contract, because his agents will get fortunes to take him wherever he wants to go. And the same thing happens with him. And, why did Fergie let him go in the first place? There's a really good question.
Rafa Benitez has been speaking to BT Sport. Let's hear from him now.
Pen up while we hear from Rafa Benitez.
What the one you threw?
As if. Here's Rafa. Pick it up.
Rafa, you must be very proud of your side this afternoon.
Yeah, obviously really pleased because to come here and to perform the way that we were performing, I think we were nearly there, very close. The chances that we had, the way that we were defending, I think against a very good team, you have to be really proud of the players and everyone.
Are you talking about that little chance at the end? You thought you got it?
I didn't see, so I was watching the linesman, and now with the VAR you have to wait, but I think it was a chance. So maybe Davis, if he can shoot and finish, we were talking about another thing, but anyway, really pleased with the effort, the commitment, and the way that we were doing things on the pitch during 90 minutes.
Was that the game plan that you wanted, that counter-attacks?
I was not thinking about to concede a goal, but okay, we did it. Then we have to manage. What I told them is that we were doing well. We conceded in the last 3 or 4 minutes in the first half. It was a pity because the team was working hard. And I was a little bit worried because they have players on the bench that they can make the difference, and we needed to keep the intensity, and that was not easy against a very good team. So that is the reason that I'm more pleased, because in the second half the team reacted well, and still we have chances to win the game.
That goal from Townsend was a fantastic breakaway, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that he's doing well. We know that his commitment is there, but also his quality. So, but this is again that the team has won. So it's not just has drawn in this case. It's not that one player that doing well. That he was fantastic, but the rest of the team working so hard to get a point here that, as I said before, could be even better.
Absolutely, a team performance. But we have to give an honourable mention to Demarai Gray as well. He had a great game.
Yeah, I think it was not easy for him the last game because he was a little bit tired, and then still he played well. And to play at the level that he played this game. So I can say not too many things because the three up front, they were fighting. Rondon was holding the ball, heading the ball for the others, and the midfielders supporting, and the defenders dealing with these very good players is not easy. So everybody was doing quite well.
Okay. Rafa Benitez there speaking to BT. Chelsea are, by the way, 1-0 up on Southampton. Trevor Chalobah with the goal at Stamford Bridge, and Leeds have just scored subject to VAR against Watford. So Leeds 1, Watford 0. Have the natives in Liverpool, where you're based, Mark, on the Everton side, begun to warm to Rafa? Because it was obviously a bit of a mixed reception when he got the job.
Well, I don't live. I live in this little village called Birkdale, where the golf course is, and I go past my local. It's at the bottom of my road, literally, and this lad called Keno. He owns a local, and he seems to wait for me every time I go past. He seems to be there, and every time he just goes in. He goes, "In Rafa we trust," and just starts laughing.
Is he a blue?
Oh crikey, is he ever? But he's a decent blue, to be fair. So listen, yeah, he's wherever he goes, Rafa, you know he will organise anything. I mean, he's done brilliantly with Townsend and Demarai Gray. I mean, fabulous signings that they've been, and when you look at them, that they've been as good as anybody, if not better than a lot of individuals in the league. I mean, he had the big two missing today as well, but he's got this organisation, and he's got a side about him where he's very, very good tactically. He's very, very good tactically as well about how you play against the opposition. And, in this league, as we know, lots of different teams play in different ways. He's got it all, Rafa. He's just a bit, sometimes he can be a bit too much over the top with players. And I don't think he's not a great kind of arm round the shoulder man, although he has matured in many, many ways. And listen, and this is a big thing, he's back home. His wife and his two girls, they live on the Wirral. They've never, ever left the Wirral when he's had all the other jobs that he's ever had. The deal was they would always stay there, and Rafa would come back. So I think he's happy, and he knows he's got decent players, and, they should be in the top 10, I would have thought, Everton.
Top 10?
Yeah.
Oh, they'll be a lot higher than that, I think.
Well, we'll wait and see. It is Everton when all's said and done, isn't it?
Yeah, he's just an outstanding manager, JD. And he's never had that kind of reputation for being the hand around the shoulder manager, but I think the players play for him. I think they do respect him.
I think they respect his tactical.
Yeah,
nerves.
but they also he's such a decent man as well, Benitez. Like, by all accounts, if you bump into Benitez and you're a man off the street and you want to talk football, he's so obsessed with the game. He will talk football to anyone. And
it'd send you to sleep. It'd bore you to sleep.
But I find that strange, that image of the nice man with somebody who never told Steven Gerrard, well done. I do find that strange, that kind of tough love that he had at Liverpool.
I told you that story, didn't I?
Yeah.
You know, but I think that was just Rafa making him wanting Steven to be, you know, the best in the world for himself as much as anything. He's a great fella when you meet him and that, but he's only got football. If you asked him, you know, did you see, I don't know, the great big new series on BBC One last Saturday or whatever, he'd just look at you like you're from Mars.
Leeds United 1, Watford.
Dan,
yeah.
Sorry, there was just a technical hit.
I was just going to say though before on Rafa that, like, it is funny. Like Andros Townsend was talking afterwards today about how you get no praise from him, almost living up to the stereotype as discussed there. No, sorry, it's not a stereotype. It's personality, and like there was a sense though that he's responding to it. But like the Demarai Gray one is really interesting. That Rafa apparently was in touch with Demarai Gray intermittently over the last couple of seasons, even when Rafa wasn't necessarily always working. And when he was in Germany, I think he sent him a message just to see how he was doing, clearly feeling that at some stage he'd get to a club where maybe, you know, he could see his attributes fitting in. And like Demarai Gray was 1.7 million pound signing, like sterling. You know, it's unbelievable. You'll have clubs sort of spending 20 times that this summer for players who maybe wouldn't even make that kind of impact. So clearly, like, he had the interpersonal skills to keep in touch with a player he really liked and sort of, you know, give them that G up. But then when he works with them, you know, he's tough on them.
Yeah, that's man management. That's man management. If he's in touch with him over a year and a half, 2 years, that makes you feel like quite special when to many you're probably half forgotten. That's man management.
Yeah, and I think also when you know your manager really, really likes you, because I'll be doing things like that, you play for him. I mean, you should do anyway, regardless, but you play for him. There's no doubt about it.
Well, it's interesting that James quietly departed the club, went to Qatar. I thought that was interesting to see. Maybe Benitez didn't fancy him.
Who? John?
James Rodriguez, yeah.
Well, part of that is because all the flaming money he's on. He's on 265 grand a week, isn't he? I mean, and I think what really peed them off at Everton was at the end of last season, just I think 2 games from the end, James wasn't fit. And he posted, obviously I don't know whether it was on Twitter or wherever, Instagram or something, on his private plane back to South America, and they still had 2 games to go. So, I mean, they couldn't wait to get him out the door and get rid of his wages.
In a hypothetical scenario, Laura, and it's not likely to happen now, but like Rafa Benitez should entirely have been on the agenda for a lot of clubs that didn't go for him. If Manchester United went for Benitez, would he take the job?
Yeah.
He would.
100%.
It's not going to happen, though.
No, because Rafa wouldn't see it as like it's Man United and it's, you know, you either love them or hate them, whatever it is, 35 miles down the East Lancs Road. He'd just go, wow, Man United, what a fantastic job. I'm off.
Are you sure?
Where do I sign? Yeah, all day long. All day long.
His Liverpool legacy would be... Yeah.
53106, so listeners get in touch about Solskjaer. Ole is more of a lucky manager than a good manager. They seem to get results just when it seems he's about to be sacked. They're more of a cup team than a league team, says Patrick. As a lifelong United fan, I like Ole as a person, but as a manager, he's just not able to tactically look at a game or adapt during play. He just wants to be nice to players, says Chris in Wicklow. And do the panel think Ole wanted to sign Ronaldo or had any say in that transfer, says Pat? Laura?
Yeah, he would have wanted to take him, absolutely. And, you know, the other big thing, and I don't know whether I've mentioned it on this, but I think, you know, after the collapse of the so-called, you know, European Super League and the amount of stick that all the American owners of all the clubs got, I would think that the Man United owners at some stage must have thought, well, we need to do something just to placate our lot. And obviously, they as soon as they knew about Ronnie, they said, they provided the funds. But the biggest thing is the shares went up. So they made themselves more money, which, you know, is really, really clever. Yeah. They were. If you listen to people in the know, just say he was never, ever going to Manchester City. That I don't know who was floating that, whether it was his agent or whatever. And apparently Man United had been in touch with him on a few occasions and just kind of tested the water. And then obviously they made that decision. But you see, I think many ways that Ole has a problem with Ronaldo because I think he's blinded by him. Look, Ronaldo's done well. 5 starts, 5 goals, I think, isn't it? A goal in each game or whatever it is. So he's not the problem at the moment. And him walking off at the end of the game. Well, that's just a little bit. There's no I in team. That's just the way that Ronaldo is. But I tell you what, everybody's changed the diet since he walked into the football club, and all kinds of things. They're all training differently because of the way that he does it. He ain't the problem whatsoever. You give him the ball.
What's the problem, Mark? What's the problem?
I think the manager is largely the problem, and that manifests itself just the way that they play. As I say, there's no real pattern to the way that they play. We mentioned the other 3 clubs who we think are all going to be up there at the top. You can say exactly how they play, and occasionally maybe Chelsea might switch it a little bit differently. Occasionally, Klopp might go play with 1 behind 3 sometimes, but generally just 4-3-3. And occasionally Pep will do something differently. But generally, if you're setting up a team to play against them, you know exactly how they play. The problem is they've got so many brilliant players in those 3 teams. There's not a lot you can do about it. But Man United, please tell me how they play. I really don't know how they play. Okay. I don't know what system you call it.
Okay, 5-3-1-0-6. So we're going to take a break. Just give you the scores in the Premier League earlier on. Man United 1, Everton 1, Burnley 0, Norwich 0 is latest with Nathan Collins in the Burnley team today. Chelsea 1, Southampton 0. Trevor Chalobah, the defender for Chelsea, on the mark as they look to get back to winning ways. Leeds 1, Watford 0. Diego Llorente with the goal for Leeds, and Wolves 1, Newcastle 0 is the latest score from the Premier League. And then the Championship have finished Coventry 4, Fulham 1 earlier on. That is a result, and latest scores we have to hand are Barnsley 0, Millwall 0, Birmingham 0, Nottingham Forest 1, Blackpool 2, Blackburn Rovers 0, Bournemouth 0, Sheffield United 0. Also goalless between Cardiff and Reading, and Derby and Swansea. It is Hull 0, Middlesbrough 0, Luton 0, Huddersfield 0. It is Peterborough 1, Bristol City 0, and it is QPR 1, Preston 1 at the moment. And in Scotland, in the Premiership, Dundee United 0, Ross County 0, Hearts 2, Motherwell 0, Livingston 0, St Mirren 1, and St Johnstone 0, Dundee 0. Back with more football chat on Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk after this. John Duggan with you through until 5 in the company of Mark Lawrenson, Dan McDonnell and Johnny Ward. The ladies set at Liverpool against Manchester City tomorrow. A sad week for the club at Anfield. Mark, Roger Hunt passing away, 1966 World Cup winner, league winner with Liverpool. Another one of the greats gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you all know the story about the cop obviously knighting him. So Sir Roger, outstanding goal scorer, and it was irony as well. I mean, when did Jimmy Greaves go? Was it a couple of weeks ago? And it was only probably due to Jimmy's injury in the World Cup in '66 that Roger got in the team on a regular basis. And I think he probably played nearly every game in the end. So, yeah, a really, really nice man. I mean, everyone comes on and says he's a really nice bloke, but he seriously was, Roger, as well. I just him and Saint are causing Mary hell wherever they are at the moment as a partnership, because two more of the good guys have gone, I'm afraid.
Yeah, very sad. Roger Hunt, rest in peace. So tomorrow is going to be a huge game, a huge global game, like Liverpool Man City. Like this is what it's all about. I was at this game 3 years ago. Remember, Mahrez missed the penalty. Just absolutely enthralled by the quality of the football on offer. Are Liverpool back, Mark? You're around the club. Are they back to where they want to be?
Yeah, they are. They might be a couple of players short in terms of winning it. At the moment, obviously, he's got a January transfer window. He's obviously hoping that Curtis Jones, who's now picked up again as well, that he really comes to the fore this season. Got competition for places, which we know he never had last year, certainly defensively. Jurgen Klopp, of course, he's rotating more because he's kind of looking at thinking, this might be like a 50-odd game season if they're successful. So far, so good. I mean, we spoke in the first half about tactics. Everybody knows the way that Liverpool play, but stopping them is really, really difficult. Their only problem tomorrow will be Trent's not playing it. He's not going to be fit, and it's a case nobody can really fill his boots because he's just an outstanding fullback going forward. So I wouldn't mind betting he might stick a Milner in there or something. I'm not quite sure, but I'm going just as a punter. In fact, I'm going in a box for one of the first time, so I'm looking forward to that. So I'll have a few.
Prawn sandwiches, Mark.
But, I'll bring them on. I'll have all of them, John. Don't worry about that.
It's the first time for everything in life, you know.
Absolutely, totally is. I'm more bothered about the hoops rather than prawn sandwiches. But I tell you what, the best thing about going to those games is the pace of which the game is played is incredible. It absolutely really is incredible. You suddenly realise, you know, how high the skill levels are in both teams. And just looking forward to it. But I mean, they'll raise the roof with it. You'll never walk alone because of Roger as well, I would have thought, before the game. So it's one of those where you've got to get in a little bit early so you don't miss stuff like that, because there won't be a dry eye in the house, I would think.
Yeah, Dan, this is one of the games you want the crowds back for, you know?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it is really, like, it's elite, as sort of Mark described it there. And I think you can even feel it with the Anfield games, and I listened to the great game against Brentford last week, and maybe away from home, and maybe it's just the entertainment value, and it just adds that sort of backdrop to it. But it's sometimes you feel like these games are built up too much and they're going to disappoint you, but it's very hard to see it with the personnel involved here. Even the loss of someone like Trent, you'd assume you'll see Man City trying to ask real questions of whoever it is that plays there. They've been very solid, City, to be fair. I know they lost to PSG, but I think they're coming off a run of clean sheets. So they're actually not necessarily like high-scoring thrillers in the way you might have perceived City a couple of years back. But you just know that Liverpool are going to ask questions of them. And it's interesting to see what Klopp does attacking-wise, because I think it was one of the games last season he played all four of them, didn't he? He played Firmino, Mane, Salah and Jota against City. And I know there's some discussion about would he be tempted to do similar again. Firmino's showing a bit of form. So I don't know what Laura thinks about that, or what way he thinks he'll go offensively.
Well, Laura?
I think he'd be more hopeful that flipping Alisson doesn't give the ball away again like he did last year to start the rot. I don't know. I don't see him going with the four, to be honest with you. I think he'll be a little bit careful for a while, and just see how the game goes. No, I don't see all four of those playing together. Seems to score for fun, doesn't he? And he doesn't really get as much praise as the Manes and the Salahs of this world. But he's been great for Liverpool because he just ended up in a position which absolutely suits him. And whatever the other two do, he kind of dovetails with them, which is for Liverpool. Obviously, they've got a very, very good player there. He's a very intelligent player as well.
It could be like 4-3-3 versus 4-3-3. Are City just going to regret at the end of the season not having a number 9, Mark?
Probably not, knowing them. I don't know. I think, but when you step away from this, chaps, and we're all kind of involved and we watch and all those kind of things, and we know people in it, and you look and you kind of think, well, they're owned by a country that's fabulously wealthy. Why didn't they just go and buy Harry Kane and shift a couple of the players out to soften the blow, maybe get 60, 70 million against whatever it was, 130, 140 million, but just go and take him. Will they regret it? Probably not, because I think they can get goals from all over the place. But the other thing as well is there's no doubt that the owners of the football club want to win the Champions League. So why wouldn't you have gone and got Harry? I really don't quite understand that at all.
So how do you see it then tactically tomorrow? How do you see it working out, Mark, this game unfolding?
I think they'll be the same. I think the problem is sometimes that they both play so much that they overplay a little bit, and we don't get too many kind of, I don't know, moments in the opposition penalty area. Lots of great passing, lots of great movement. I think it'd be really, really tight, John. I really seriously do, because the other thing I have about this season would be that 4 teams got a chance of winning it if we include Manchester United, and I think the results against all 4, all the other 3 teams, if you're one of the top 4, will be paramount to maybe somebody winning the league. So I'm a little bit at the moment with these games, teams not getting beat. So that win at Chelsea for Manchester City last week was easily the best result of the season for any team so far.
I need to get at the smelling salts, lads, because Timo Werner has scored for Chelsea. They're 2-0 up now against Southampton. They've been pretty dominant, haven't they, Johnny?
They have been good, yeah. Lukaku just had one chalked off for a marginal offside. And I guess this is the point, you know, you could see Man United kind of half labouring in a game like this. They already have, really. And, you know, this is fairly routine already from Chelsea, but looks of it. We don't think as well, JD, the demands on these players, like Man City had to go and play Paris Saint-Germain during the week. They played Chelsea last week. Now they're playing Liverpool, all essentially in the space of just over 7 days. It's an awful lot to ask. And we expect them to perform. Like, Laura's absolutely right. If you go, like, TV does not do justice to the quality of a game like this. The speed of their movement and how quickly they touch the ball, everything they do, it's amazing. But, like, if De Bruyne has another fairly disappointing game, we'll be given out tomorrow. And, like, we don't sometimes think about just how demanding the schedule is. Liverpool had a admittedly easier game in the Champions League this week, but a lot of their players were still in action, would have played last week in the game against Brentford, and yet we expect everything to be perfect tomorrow. Like, it's very demanding on them in such a short space of time. But it'll be an intriguing game, because I think Man City and Chelsea, if you're looking at where the title race is going, you can only come away from that game and say City have an edge over Chelsea. Tomorrow is going to be really interesting, because if Liverpool can make a statement victory, we could be in for a hell of a campaign. But you just wonder, City have conceded 1 goal in the league. Like, Liverpool looked very, very open against Brentford. So with Trent's going to be a big issue. I think, as Dan says, if Milner is playing or whoever, they're definitely going to tackle and try to expose that side. But it's going to be very interesting, because obviously, when, as Laura said, Liverpool were really poor when Man City played last season, when they hammered them. They're in a different place now. I think they're full of confidence. Still, some of their players not quite at it. Firmino, I don't think Mane's playing as well as he could as well, whereas Salah's in unbelievable form. But it's a weird one with Mane, Laura. Like, last season he looked tired, but he hasn't really. He's still he's just a little bit off it, isn't he?
Yeah, he's not quite at it. But I tell you what, you ask all the players in that team, they absolutely love him, because he gives a massive shift in terms of, you know, making it difficult for defenders who play against him or fullbacks to get out, etc. And he's very, very unselfish, and they will tell you that he's the nicest bloke in that football club, but also one of the best players. And just going back to that, you know, about the pace of the game, if you ever could, and we probably can't anymore because for all different reasons, but if you could sit in the very, very front row, or even in the manager's dugout and watch the game, and if you think it's fast when you watch it in row 28, wait until you watch it in row 1. It's like, wow, it really seriously is.
The VAR has now ruled that goal out, and Thomas Tuchel's got booked there at Stamford Bridge for losing his rag. Azpilicueta with a foul in the build-up. So Chelsea 1, Southampton 0 still. Burnley 0, Norwich 0 is the latest. Leeds 1, Watford 0. And an own goal, Wolves 1, Newcastle 1. Jeff Hendrick has come on for Newcastle. How do you see this one going tomorrow, Dan? Are you just more an excited neutral, or do you give it to one or the other?
I'm an excited neutral to a degree. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's a fascinating game. I don't have a strong opinion on how it'll go. I mean, and sometimes you end up just sitting in defence then and saying it's going to be a draw. But I don't know. I think Johnny does make a good point about the demands of the week that City have had, and Liverpool were able to sort of stroll through against Porto. They made a number of second half changes to sort of rest legs, which probably, Jota come off. It points to maybe players that will be involved tomorrow. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to go for a draw. I think City are across the season will be the stronger team, but you think maybe just they could be vulnerable coming off the week they've had to a full frontal sort of Liverpool attack at this stage potentially. But I don't know. No strong opinion. I'd be interested to hear if anyone else has a confident prediction, but I am leaning for the not a boring draw, but the on the fence draw result. Yeah,
listeners out there, 53106, you have a strong opinion on Liverpool and City tomorrow. Chelsea had a bit of a week where they're just a little bit off there, Mark, weren't they? And Tuchel was quite honest about that.
Yeah. No, he absolutely totally was. And I think he said that the day before they lost in the Champions League, they had they were training the day before, and he said we were sharp as anything, we looked fab, and then when the game started, it just didn't happen. But that's the way that it is. It sometimes doesn't happen that way. I think the problem is sometimes, though, with the Champions League, with the group stage, players know they can lose a couple of games. I mean, they don't go out to lose them, but they just know they can lose a couple of games. And if it takes 5 or 10% off your performance and your edge, that's why you get some stupid results, to be honest with you. I don't think it's any more than that.
Jeff Hendrick has been given that goal now. Great to see.
Yeah, he's literally just off the bench. Jeff Hendrick does not score many goals. Troy Parrott has set up a goal as well for MK Dons, but I think Stephen Kenny will be delighted with that. Jeff Hendrick's the player that he
played well against Serbia. I
thought he did. Like Hendrick's a funny one, because I think if you ask most Irish fans, they'd have a kind of a more of a negative view on him at this stage. But there are like patches in games where he looks very good, and I know Kenny has put a lot of faith in him. I think he really does like him, but it's fantastic that he scored. Give him a bit of confidence going into the game next weekend.
Yeah,
God, it's a long time since he scored a goal, I think, John. I don't have the stats in front of me, but it's been a while. I mean, he wasn't popular at Newcastle. I'm just checking here. He scored 2 goals in 2020 for Newcastle in the first half of last season, but that's his first goal of 2021 now, and the 2nd of October. But that is some good news that's needed. I mean, there was only one Irish player started in the Premier League last weekend. It was Shane Duffy. So I think that was the case. So yeah, I mean, it's good to see Hendrick, Nathan Collins involved today. But I mean, Hendrick is a valid point. I mean, Kenny has kept faith in him. He did okay last month, but the concern naturally for this month would have been a lack of football between the windows. And that's a good news story today, and it's badly needed.
Messi was an amazing individual goal there, Mark, during the week. The Barcelona collapse. I know I've got to read Simon Cooper's book on it. I can't wait to read it on the whole history of the club. It's staggering what's happened to Barcelona, hasn't it, in the last while? Yeah,
although you just look at the players that they brought in. That's the big recruitment's a massive thing. I go on about this, everyone, and bore them to death. But recruitment at the football club is the second most important job, because if you get it wrong, and you get it wrong at the top level, you get it spectacularly wrong. But listen, they've just been spending money that they don't have. I mean, where did they think that was going to lead them eventually? And I mean, Madrid are the same as well. It's obvious as well that the manager at Barca, he'll be gone in the next few weeks, won't he? And are they saying, is it Xavi going to come back, or Iniesta, or whatever, and run the club and all those kind of things? But they just haven't got the players at the moment that that they had 5 years plus. And once you lose Messi, it was always going to be kind of deflation for them, certainly. But listen, if you, as I say, you don't get that recruitment right, you can be in all sorts of serious problems. And they've had players taking wage drops and all that kind of thing. You lose a couple of games, and players are thinking like, well, sod you, I've done you a favour, and look at the state of this football club.
Could you have seen Sheriffs win a year ago, Dan, when they lost to Dundalk?
Oh, I mean, like, it's an incredible story. I mean, there's two sides to the story as well. I mean, like, it's not quite a small plucky club from Moldova, because they consider themselves to be in Moldova. They consider themselves to be from Transnistria, which is a sort of a state nearby which has strong Russian loyalties. And I think the owner of the club, there's a sort of Sheriff is like an institution in the area, somewhat of a secretive institution in some ways. And they did lose to Dundalk around this time last year. They lost on penalties. They weren't great in the game. But I know from speaking to some of the Dundalk players that were over there, I mean, it was an incredible complex. They knew they'd beaten a brilliant club in the sense of, the stadium, the facilities. I think they have 2 stadiums on site. And effectively what Sheriff did was, that was a bad result for them. They pretty much sacked off the entire squad. They kept 3 of them, I think. There was a defender and 2 attacking players. And they brought in an entirely new squad for this year's European campaign, because that's what they do. They bring them in, there's a heavy turnover, and they move on. But whatever recruitment they've done this year has worked. And I mean, they won their way through the qualifiers, which was no small feat. But to take it up another level now, I did watch a bit of that game the other night. Yeah, it was a bit of a smash and grab in a way in terms of possession and all of that. But I mean, they've pulled in players from all over the place. And they've somehow managed to come up with a formula that can get you into the Champions League. It'll mean that other clubs elsewhere will push the boat out and overstretch themselves to try and do something similar. But I know you couldn't have envisaged it. You knew they were a decent outfit that had the finances to come back and be better the next year, but not this good. I mean, it's off the wall stuff, but clearly their recruitment, someone is doing a very, very good job there, because the league they play in, they've won it for the last 19 years or something, and they're not pushed in it that regularly, so they basically exist to play in Europe, but they're doing it very well. You're going to the box at Liverpool tomorrow. I'm going to see Spurs Villa tomorrow, Mark. Why? Yeah, I don't know. It's masochism, I think, to see Tottenham play at the moment. No easy answers to Spurs, I can tell you that, Mark. No. And I like, if we're still on the recruitment thing, what they've done at Aston Villa. I think the manager's good. I think it's a very sensible manager. I like the way that they play as well. You know, all right, you lose Grealish, but you get 3 or 4 other players in, and they all look very, very good players. I'm sorry, John, but Spurs will just be Spurs. That's the way they have always been. That's how I've always known them. And you know, Harry Kane, you know he'll end up scoring, and you'll probably at one stage look like you might finish in the top 4, but you won't, and you might get to the quarter-final of the FA Cup and get beat. But is that not what happens with Tottenham? Well, not under Pochettino. No, okay, I'll give you that. So why let him go? Why not give him some more money to buy some more players? The biggest mistakes, like, the club has been fantastically run business-wise, and the stadium's magnificent, and they're probably worth a lot of money if they're going to sell it. But the product. Are you a Nuno fan, Mark? Oh, I like him. I'm not sure it's a job for him, but I mean, there's one for you. Why did they take Nuno? Because he didn't cost any money. Well, it's because they took him because they had about 10 people that they wanted to get that they couldn't. Well, right, but wouldn't they all have cost money as well? Yeah, I don't know if money was the issue, but yeah, I think Jorge Mendes, is an influential figure in the game. Yeah, all right. So he managed to convince Daniel Levy to take Nuno. I think I don't know if I told you, I read a great article about him 2 or 3 years ago, and somebody asked him a question. A journalist asked him a question, and he said, it's quite unusual for goalkeepers to become managers and coaches, and he said, I don't know why. He said, because I always thought I would. And then he went on to explain the fact that, listen, if you're the goalkeeper in the team, and I don't know where he played, but it sounded like they were, semi-successful. He said, I was forever watching the play. And he said, I would be watching everything that happens in the play if I wasn't making any saves, because I'd be stood on the edge of my penalty area. And he said he had time to kind of reflect and actually sit down after games and work out, why they played this way, why they maybe conceded goals, why they were so good going forward, all those kind of things. And he said it was just always in my head that I felt like I had a head start on anybody in terms of managing or coaching because I was a goalkeeper. Laura, enjoy the box tomorrow. Enjoy the match. I shall. Mark Lawrenson with the lads, and we're going to continue our football chat with Dan and Johnny after 4. Just to let you know, in the Premier League, Man United 1, Everton 1 is a result. Burnley 0, Norwich 0 a half-time score. Chelsea 1, Southampton 0. Trevor Chalobah for Chelsea had a goal ruled out as well. Leeds 1, Watford 0 as a half-time. Diego Llorente for Leeds. And Wolves 1, Newcastle 1. Jeff Hendrick equalising for Newcastle in that game at Molineux. In the Championship, Coventry beat Fulham 4-1 earlier on. Barnsley 0, Millwall 0 as a half-time. Other half-time scores: Birmingham City 0, Nottingham Forest 2. Blackpool 2, Blackburn Rovers 0. It is Bournemouth 0, Sheffield United 0. It is Cardiff 0, Reading 1. Is Mick McCarthy's job under threat there? Derby 0, Swansea 0. Hull 0, Middlesbrough 0 as a half-time. Luton 0, Huddersfield Town 0 as a half-time. Peterborough 2, Bristol City 2 as a half-time, and QPR 1, Preston 1 as a half-time as well. In the League of Ireland Premier Division, we've got Longford against Bows at 7:30 and Sligo Rovers against Waterford at 7:45. And in Scotland, half-time scores in the Premiership there. It is at the moment Dundee United 1, Ross County 0. Hearts 2, Motherwell 0. Livingston 0. St Mirren 1 and St Johnstone 2, Dundee 0. And in the golf, John Murphy tied for third at the Dunhill Links after his third round. He's 11 under par, the young lad from Kinsale, and he's 3 shots off the lead, which is held by Danny Willett. Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk is back after the news.
Talk football on Off the Ball
with Sky. It's an unmissable Super Sunday with Liverpool versus Man City, live on Sky Sports.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday here on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5. Remember, football and Off the Ball brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. We're joined by the football correspondent of the Irish Independent, Dan McDonnell, and a broadcaster and journalist, Johnny Ward, to talk about the beautiful game. You can text us 53106, tweet us at Off the Ball. We're streaming the conversation. Listen on News Talk. Watch us on the Off the Ball social channels, for Periscope on Twitter at Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook, and on the OTB Sports app for iOS and Android. Search OTB Sports in your app store now. We've Mark Lawrenson in the first hour. We're just talking about Nuno Espirito Santo, who was a goalkeeper in his playing career, and Laura was saying that it was an interesting how a goalkeeper could read the game and see things that other players couldn't. I was just going through goalkeepers that have become managers, lads. Lopetegui, who did so well at Seville after his ignominious departure from Spain. Bruce Arena, I never knew he was a goalkeeper, from LA Galaxy. And Raymond Goethals, the Belgian.
Dino Zoff,
probably the most successful one of them. I think he led Italy to the Euro 2000 final. Mike Walker, didn't know he was a goalkeeper.
Mike Walker, yeah.
Yeah, Mike Walker from Everton and Norwich. Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. It
is a bit weird, isn't it?
It is. I'm just kind of going through the names here, and actually the Russian fella, Stanislav Cherchesov, who did so well at the World Cup, was a goalkeeper as well. He actually was a goalkeeper in the 1994 World Cup. It's coming to my mind now.
Wow. 1994 for Russia.
Yeah.
Was that not
Was it the Commonwealth of Independent?
No, it was 1994, not the Chelsea keeper, because I remember distinctly
Dmitry Karin with the tracksuit trousers.
Because he wore, like, it was in 40-degree heat and he was wearing tracksuit bottoms. I could never get my head around that.
I think
the Saudi keeper was as well, but maybe for sort of religious reasons or whatever, I speculate. But we were talking during the break, JT, about Irish managers as well. If Mick McCarthy were to be let go, Dan could correct me on this, I'm not sure there'd be any Irish manager in the four divisions.
I'm trying to think now. I mean, Graham Coughlin was employed until recently. We've had a couple in recent years who've been in employment and drifted out. Joe Dunn was as well. You could be right, Johnny, unless something obvious is staring me in the face. But obviously Stephen Reid was in a caretaker capacity there. But no, I think in terms of permanent ones, you could be right. Obviously, you have Jim Goodwin up in Scotland, and there's a couple of other ones, but yeah, you could be right on something there, yeah.
And what, like one Premier League starter was it last weekend for Ireland? I mean, that's kind of where we're at with regard to English football at the moment.
It's the recurrent debate. I mean, like at some stage, like I know obviously we judge ourselves by our number of players in the Premier League ladder, and it's inevitable, you know, and it is at a probably an all-time low or a low in the context of, you know, I don't know, 40 years. You know, you come back to a distant time, I think, when not that many people would have played over. So it is low. It is low numbers. I mean, at least the only thing is you can put the spin in it. I mean, Nathan Collins is making his Premier League debut today, and you'd imagine he's going to be there for most of the rest of his career, by the sounds of it. You know, and you'd hope it on with Bamidele and Adamida and some of the younger players. You know, that they're at the start of their journey, as opposed to sort of just looking at Shane Long and Kieran Clark and a couple of others that are coming towards the end, you know, Darren Randolph, that there is at least a number of players in the under sort of 23 bracket that look like they're possibly going to play around that level, and even a couple of the ones in the Championship that maybe will have ambitions of going there, Jason Knight and a couple of others. So that's the sort of glass half full taking it. But I mean, it is. I mean, this time next week, it's going to be an hour or so from kickoff in Baku, and no doubt we'll probably be having versions of this discussion. But there comes a point as well where you have to find a way to make the most of what you have, and I don't think, you know, Stephen Kenny certainly is someone who speaks negatively about the players he has. He's got belief in them. It's just maybe some of his belief isn't matched by their club managers.
Yeah, there's a good piece in the Independent today with Zach Elbouzedi as well about his move to Sweden with Aidan Fitzmaurice, just how much he's enjoying life in a completely different culture, despite the fact he was struggling in the third tier to get a game in England. And maybe the coach didn't rate him, but it's just Conor Rowan, who we mentioned as well. Obviously, he's had two spells in different countries apart from Britain as well, and it's becoming more of a thing for Irish players.
But I think the thing as well is that, I mean, Zach Elbouzedi struggled to get in at Lincoln, and I mean, Lincoln are an unfashionable name, but Lincoln actually are pretty decent, and I think that this is this is the thing. Like, football in England is very strong at the moment. Like, the Premier League is like, it's managed. Although there's a couple of financial issues lower down the league, and there's massive losses being racked up, and that's, you know, they haven't suffered, to say, the pandemic impact that, say, Spain and other places have felt. Like, it's hard, you know. It's really hard for players to break into like a really competitive level. I mean, the Championship even now is a high quality league, and there's a serious competition. I mean, we spoke earlier, even England have increased their own production lines. Like, someone like Demarai Gray, who's been exceptional in the Premier League this year, and like, where would he be in the pecking order for even an England squad? You know, Patrick Bamford left out of the squad during the week. And you know, they have a raft of talent. You know, Mason Greenwood. You know, and that's reflective of the depth of English talent that there is. And we are trying to fit our players in there. But there is an argument, obviously, sometimes for doing what Zach Elbazzeti did and going off to play in front of 50,000 people in a Stockholm derby this weekend. And maybe one manager at Lincoln, he didn't fit into their vision, but there is a big football world out there, and maybe our players are going to have to be more open-minded about it, for the sake of the long-term future.
Cardiff are now on the live table 20th in the Championship. They're 1-0 down to Reading at the moment, and just going through their recent scores, if they lost today, this would be their 5th loss in a row in the Championship. This is sackable form, unfortunately, for Mick McCarthy, lads.
Yeah, that initial burst,
sugar high.
Yeah, the sugar high is gone, and yeah, like, it's Mick. I mean, was Mick like out of a job for a month since he took his first job? Whatever, he's barely been out of work, and you know, it's a difficult one for him, because he will pick up a job even if he's let go. But yeah, it's been some collapse.
They've started conceding a lot of goals. I mean, it's not necessarily what you would associate with a Mick McCarthy team. You'd have your sort of perception of how they might be, and they've become somewhat erratic in that regard, which is quite surprising. And I think they had 4 knocked past them during the week. I think, John, you might have the recent
West
results
Brom,
in front of you.
West Brom.
Now, West Brom are pretty good, but even still, it is a slight. I think the problem that Mick will have there is that the fans didn't want him there in the first place, but he went in and did an exceptional job initially, and pretty much behind closed doors. So didn't necessarily get the huge amount of love for that. And now you have a situation where the fans are back in, their form is struggling, and you have a manager who probably didn't fit the profile of what they wanted, and all of a sudden they'll turn on him quicker. So that's a bit unfortunate. I see Darrell Horgan is just after scoring, albeit again in League One. We are getting excited about a player scoring against Morecambe, but that is where we're at. Darrell Horgan at least might be coming into the week in good form as well. He scored for Wickham there.
These people are interesting as well, the managers who can't seem to really let go. Like Brian Cody, I don't think will ever really leave Kilkenny until he's basically pushed out the door. And it was the same with Mickey Hart, where it just went on too long. And straight away, can you imagine
Arsene Wenger,
can you imagine going from the successes of Tyrone and being, you know, perennially in or around the All-Ireland finals to take the Louth job? I mean, that's just a level of, like,
Dan McDonnell, you've been publicly there's absolute outrage here.
The Louth, the hardcore Louth GA
the disparagement of Louth, your county.
Well,
listen, I mean, they've got a new stadium and everything. Like, I mean, listen, if only the football clubs in Louth could have the ability to politically get things done. Maybe Mickey knows where to go.
We spoke as well about Rafa. Like, I think Rafa would probably manage until he basically drops. And Mick is like, Mick's early 60s, so he's not that old. But I'd say it's just like, he probably can't envisage not being involved with a football club.
It's an addiction. Yes, it's 100%. Yeah, it is an addiction. I think you're right. I think the longest spell he's been out of work, Johnny, not quite a couple of months, but I think it's something like 6 months. It actually is. He's certainly never been out of work for a year anyway. And okay, listen, I'm sure he's been well paid for his endeavours, but you don't get you get a nice severance deal for the Ireland one, and presumably with Apoel as well. But I do think it is closer to that addiction, as you that's the word you used, JD, that there's that sense of involvement in football. And I mean, it is true. I think sometimes, I think Roy Keane spoke, ironically enough, we speak about Mick McCarthy and we flip to Roy Keane. But like, Roy Keane did speak recently in that interview with Gary Neville about there are managers who just get jobs, who get loads of chances. Now, I don't actually, for all their history, I don't think he was thinking about Mick in this context. But there are a number. It feels like in management that once you get 1 or 2 chances, you do a good job, you keep getting more chances. You have people like Gary Rowett, who's at Millwall, Gary Monk, a couple of guys who just seem to have managed like 4, 5, 6 different championship clubs, and they have this reputation for being reliable. And then you'll have these other managers who go in, their first job doesn't work out, and they're never seen again. And that's just, it's funny how the game works out for some people.
Sounds like Hollywood, really.
Well, yeah, it's sometimes there's a sense of, particularly the championship. I mean, the attritional rate for managers there is such that clubs possibly know that they're never going to have a manager for longer than 2-3 seasons, and as a result, they get into a situation where they just look for that quick hit. Like Neil Warnock's a classic example as well of someone who, I think Neil Warnock's over 70 now, I think. I'm not sure how many clubs he's managed, but again, like when Middlesbrough were looking for a manager, that's where they were looking for, where you would think we sometimes talk about the trend of like young managers and look at Nagelsmann and a certain type of young manager coming into the game, but actually you go to the English lower leagues and there's a real still belief that no, you need to try and trust it for this particular scenario.
And it's interesting as well in the Irish context that I know Stephen Bradley was asked this week, like, what are your ambitions? Because he's done well at Shamrock Rovers, and people maybe don't think so much about what are his own ambitions. But if you've him, like Stephen O'Donnell would have come through having played for, Arsenal underage and like a deep thinker about the game. Tim Clancy had a very good career, like a really solid career in Scotland. Rory Higgins now will have a lot of money at Derry. He's another disciple of Stephen Kenny, and he's just infatuated with football. But where's their ambition? Like that, put that to you even, Dan. Like, where's their ambition? If they can't all do well in the League of Ireland, but if they do, there's no obvious pathway to a higher, like a proper higher job, because Irish managers don't have any currency in England right now for whatever reason.
Like, you need a particular type of club. I mean, Stephen Bradley was definitely in the frame for MK Dons recently, but they ended up appointing a guy from, he was a Scottish guy, but not necessarily like a terrific playing pedigree, who'd been coaching, I think, in Belgium, I think, and then he'd previously been involved in the youth team. So it sort of depends. Like, it is. I mean, if we're talking about, we could probably mention, there's probably like dozens upon dozens of really good ex-Premier League and Championship players who can't get a sniff. I saw like Harry Kewell there last week getting sacked by a club in the conference. Like, why does he even feel the need to still be going? Again, it's clearly the addiction to be involved with the game. When like so many of his ex-teammates, like people like Steve Finnan, just leave the game completely and they don't want it. And why is Harry Kewell just suddenly, what does he want to manage in the National League? Because they want an involvement in the game, and as a result, then, so you're talking about a young, say, Irish manager, Johnny. It's very hard for them. To be honest, the obvious route would be Scotland, and we've seen Stephen Kenny try it before. We've seen Pat Fenlon try it before. And it didn't really work out. I mean, Fenlon, again, both of them got to a cup final, but probably got, they didn't get much. They didn't have the credit in the bank to survive a tough season afterwards. But you've seen Oran Carney up north got a chance in Scotland as well too, and that is probably the route to go. For those guys it is possibly difficult, but I mean maybe their route, and maybe the route that so many people are so invested in, say even in Stephen Kenny doing well, is that maybe the international setup here, even if it's like 21s or that's another way that you maybe progress up the ladder. But it is a fair point. It's so competitive out there that there's people with really good playing CVs can't get a sniff. So it's going to be very hard for someone here whose name doesn't carry any weight outside this jurisdiction.
I'm just going through the clubs Neil Warnock has managed.
We only have 40 minutes, Jake.
Yeah, Scarborough, Notts County, Huddersfield, Plymouth, Oldham, Bury, Sheffield United, Crystal Palace, QPR, Leeds, Rotherham, Cardiff and Middlesbrough. Some going. We had a text in here. Brendan Rodgers is an Irish man managing in the Premier League. Says Cork.
Yeah, sorry, that's actually completely true. So I should, this actually annoys me as well. But in the Republic of Ireland, and even Mick, I mean, Mick is essentially a Northern Englishman in many respects. That's where he was born and raised. He's been around the English game all his life. So our homegrown managers, Brendan Rodgers is the exception. But last night, just it is interesting watching, because I was at Shamrock Rovers Derry, and Shamrock Rovers played 3 at the back, and Derry City, who are obviously they're 20 points behind Shamrock Rovers, they played 3 up top. So they played 3 up top against 3 at the back, effectively. And you see, the game is evolving, but you rarely see something like that. And it was absolutely fascinating to watch tactically 2 young managers, how they're going to square up against each other. Shamrock Rovers won the game, but a lot of these disciples of Stephen Kenny kind of now have jobs in the league, and they want to be better than Stephen Kenny. And a lot of people wouldn't be into the League of Ireland, but I do think on the coaching front, these guys have done their pro licenses with top managers from England as well, or top players from England, and they all have great ideas, or they think they have great ideas about the game. They're constantly thinking about the game, and when you see games like last night where you've these 3 at the back taking on 3 up top, it's absolutely fascinating to watch.
I think if our managers are going to progress in reality, they have to do something special in Europe. Yep. I mean, that's the thing. That is. I should have really said that before. I mean, that's the obvious answer. And Michael O'Neill was obviously here. We should mention, and clearly, that is what can happen for you. And that's why it's very hard for all of them to get there. Only one of them can realistically do it.
Subject to VAR, Wolves have now gone 2-1 up against Newcastle. Wang Yi-chan has got both goals. Jeff Hendrick on the mark for Newcastle. Leeds 1, Watford 0. Diego Llorente earlier on in the game for Leeds. Chelsea 1, Southampton 0 is the latest. 1 hour into the game. Trevor Chalobah on the mark for the pensioners. Burnley 0, Norwich 0. Nathan Collins starting today. Coventry beat Fulham earlier on in the Championship by 4-1. Barnsley and Millwall is goalless. It's Birmingham 0, Nottingham Forest 3. So big change around since Chris Hughton departed the City Ground. Blackpool 2, Blackburn Rovers 1. It is Bournemouth 0, Sheffield United 1. Cardiff 0, Reading 1. Derby 0, Swansea 0. It is Hull 0, Middlesbrough 0. Luton 0, Huddersfield 0. Peterborough 2, Bristol City 2. And QPR 1, Preston 2. Do we have a goal here, Johnny?
Happening, yes, Southampton.
James Ward-Prowse.
With the equaliser from the spot, I think, and obviously definitely put the kibosh on Chelsea, saying that they looked like it was kind of game over at 2-0. Southampton have come back, and this is fascinating. Half an hour left here. Chelsea obviously with a bit of a challenge on.
Yeah, it's been this is probably the first challenge. This is from the penalty spot. James Ward-Prowse doesn't generally miss them and sent Mendy the wrong way. So Southampton have equalised at Stamford. Chelsea 1, Southampton 1, and maybe the first challenge for Thomas Tuchel. It's been a long and beautiful honeymoon. Turning around Frank Lampard's team, winning the Champions League, but we know we've got an owner who's got his finger on the trigger all the time, and it's the first challenge that Thomas Tuchel.
I think he's possibly okay for that.
Well, maybe for about a week, I'd say, Dan. I'm only joking.
No, I know. I think they always say there's an 18-month shelf life with these things with Chelsea managers, isn't there? So I see Chilwell seems to be taking some of the blame for the incident, but. They've had a slightly rocky one. I know there was some criticism of his approach against Man City last week, that he didn't go back to the template that had worked in the Champions League final. Again, I mean, everything he did probably in the first 6 months was a pleasant surprise, and he clearly made them a top side, and now he's judged by a higher bar. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting half an hour, certainly, that's for sure.
53106 for your text messages. We got one. Paul McShane will come good as a manager, says one of them.
He's at Manchester United now, yeah. He's got an interesting job at the moment. Gary Dicker is doing something similar at Brighton. And yeah, McShane is playing as an overage player for the under-23 team, but also coaching with them. So it is interesting. It feels like you're talking about goalkeepers who manage. Like Shay Given, when he was at Derby until recently, he wasn't the goalkeeping coach. He was actually a coach. He was actually involved with sort of outfield stuff as well. But you do wonder in these next generation. I mean, John O'Shea, we've had previously on the show. He was at Reading as assistant manager. I think in the next couple of years you're going to see him go into management, and I think with his background and pedigree, he'll definitely get a chance, and then obviously it's up to you when you get the chance. Damien Duff has taken his time, and it's more, look, Then the youth team wrote now in Robbie Keane, you'd be expecting to go there eventually. So there's a generation where you're sort of waiting for it to take off for them, and it just hasn't quite happened. I mean, another one who's doing extremely well from ex-Irish internationals is Lee Carsley, except he's manager of the England under-21 side.
As we know, the route Gareth Southgate took. This is probably the text of the year that's come in here on 53106. About a goalkeeper ended up managing Pope John Paul II was a goalkeeper, ended up managing the Catholic Church. This is one of our texters.
Doesn't get bigger than that.
Yeah. Well, big history and tradition.
A lot of expectation.
Yeah, and a big following. A following around the world.
Don't get the crowds they used to, though.
No.
Speaking about Derby, the fascinating interview, Dan, with Richard Keogh in The Guardian about his whole departure from Derby and the settlement and the car crash, obviously. Yeah,
so at some stage Richard Keogh was going to speak, and I think David Heitner, who's a journalist I've done quite well, who he's been good on Richard Keogh's stories throughout, so clearly has some relationship there. And yeah, I mean, people are obviously quite familiar, I think, with the story of Richard Keogh. He was in the car crash after the team bonding night, where he doesn't drive, Richard Keogh. He was the backseat passenger, but then it felt like he was singled out for particularly harsh treatment by the club in the aftermath when was Mason Bennett and Tom Lawrence, they crashed their cars and they scampered, and Richard Keogh was left. I mean, he's left out cold in the back seat. I mean, this could have been a very different story. So Keogh has spoken what feels like probably sort of a year and a half on, maybe now, a bit longer than that at this stage. He has come back from a very serious injury. He speaks in the piece about the actual severity of his injury. I mean, people thought his career was threatened or even over. It did cost him his Ireland career because he was a first-choice player under Mick McCarthy when it happened. And by the time he came back, I think that ship had very much sailed. But yeah, he comes across quite well in the piece. Doesn't come across as someone who's especially bitter, but obviously has his issues. I mean, his wife speaks about how she really feared for his mental health and his well-being and what happened afterwards. I mean, he was awarded a quite substantial settlement in an employment appeal case with Derby. So I think it's fair to say, with that in mind, that Derby didn't handle the situation well. It's been proven that was the case. And Keogh probably looks to apply some context to maybe the background. He said he'd had a family bereavement a week before, might have impacted on his behaviour, because his behaviour still wasn't like, for a club captain. If people remember, like, there was a team bonding night, there was taxis laid on to bring the players home, and the players said, "No, we're grand." And clearly, I can understand to some degree why you would look for maybe your older players to show leadership. But the point is, when it came to punishment, it looked very much like Richard Keogh, as an older, more dispensable player, they thought they could treat him in a different way to the younger, more saleable assets, and it is backfired. I mean, Derby as a club are all over the shop now, so clearly there's issues over decision making that's taken place there. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice piece. I don't know if you lads have read it or
I've read it.
It's well worth reading. I mean, the Guardian
playing today for Blackpool, they're 2-1 up against Blackburn. If he was a striker, I wonder it would be in the Irish squad.
The Guardian, rightly or wrongly, again, this is the type of article that basically should not be available for free, but it is, and I'm not giving out, so anyone can read it. Lawrence had followed another Derby player, Mason Bennett, out of the pub. Bennett drove his Mercedes with no passengers, and after a minute or so, when he stopped at a giveaway line, Lawrence went into the back of him before careering into the lamppost. This is the shocking part, really. In the panic that followed, everyone fled the scene. Everyone apart from Keogh. He had been abandoned by his teammates, left unconscious in the wreckage of Lawrence's car. To all intents, he was left for dead. And it was certainly a difficult moment for Keogh when he realised that later on. He was like, wow, okay. Lawrence and Bennett returned to the scene 45 minutes later, by which time Keogh had headed home. He'd head home because they were all like, we're in...
It ended up in a very different situation.
Yeah, and in fairness, I mean, it's kind of like the hit and run situation, like where obviously panic sets in, but he was just left there. He was left, and it was very, very hard for him to deal with that. And he himself then had to wake up and try to abscond because he realised the crap that he was in. Staggering stuff.
Yeah, I think it's noticeable. Keogh's mentioned the people who were very good to him during that time in terms of reaching out and keeping in touch. He goes out of his way to mention Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane. They're mentioned first. who would have been his previous Irish management team, Mick McCarthy and Terry Connor. But he even mentions Mason Mount as well, who was on loan at Derby, I think in 2018, 2019 as part of his development, and clearly felt that Keogh was a really good person to him. And Mount, I think, even visited him in hospital, which sort of says something about the esteem that Keogh was held in. And certainly when the story happened, I would have maybe tried to get in touch with a couple of people around, say, the Ireland squad and stuff. So I wouldn't know Richard Keogh too well at all, actually. But he does seem like a really popular fella. And again, while his behaviour on the night wasn't perfect, it did seem that it was very much out of character with their perception of him. And certainly that whole sight that Johnny described, the players fleeing the scene, presumably because they know that they're footballers too, and they have this sort of
we don't
know, John. But like obviously, like both the drivers of the cars ended up subsequently, ended up in true legal proceedings and stuff, and people can see how that all played out. But clearly, there is there's the footballer's life is a strange one, and there was clearly panic that set in at that particular stage. And Keogh just obviously feels, or clearly became, a fall guy of sorts in the aftermath. And it seems like a particularly sad case. But he did win his case against Derby and was compensated for it. But obviously it still cost him a big chunk of his career. And he will face questions about this, unfortunately, which seems unfair, because the other shocking thing that was mentioned, for me, it was hinted to at the time, but that there was actually other Derby players involved in the car who've never been named. And clearly the sort of the omerta existed there, that like they closed ranks and they managed to keep those names private. But they were the lucky ones, because their teammate who was also in the car with them, he got sacked just because he couldn't get out of the car in time.
He did say about Lawrence as well. Keogh said, I could tell he was very remorseful. He came and visited me and we stayed in touch, and I could tell he was genuine. So like there are kind of exonerating circumstances as well, but the image of him just being left for dead in the back of the car is quite shocking.
Okay, latest scores from the Premier League. It finished earlier on. Man United 1, Everton 1. Latest scores: Burnley 0, Norwich 0. Chelsea 1, Southampton 1. James Ward-Prowse equalising from the spot after Trevor Chalobah had put Chelsea in front. So it really kind of raises the stakes for Liverpool City tomorrow. Leeds 1, Watford 0, Diego Llorente, and Wolves have taken a 2-1 lead now over Newcastle. Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk is back after this break.
Football on Off the Ball
with Sky. Don't miss Brighton versus Arsenal on Saturday Night Football, live on Sky Sports.
Welcome back to Off the Ball Saturday on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 5 with Johnny Ward, the broadcaster and journalist, and Dan McDonnell, the football correspondent of the Irish Independent. Man United 1, Everton 1. Earlier results with Andros Townsend equalising Anthony Martial's opener. Latest scores in the Premier League: Burnley 0, Norwich 0. Chelsea 1, Southampton 1. James Ward-Prowse equalising for Chelsea after Trevor Chalobah put the pensioners in front. Leeds 1, Watford 0, Diego Llorente. And Wolves are leading Newcastle by 2-1. This is at Molineux. Both goals scored by Hwang Hee-chan. In the Championship, Coventry beat Fulham 4-1 earlier. Sami Samodic has scored twice for Peterborough against Bristol City today. That is in the Championship. QPR 2, Preston 2, Luton 0, Huddersfield 0, Hull 0, Middlesbrough 0 is the latest. It is Derby 0, Swansea 0, Cardiff 0, Reading 1. So Mick McCarthy's side looking at another defeat there. Bournemouth 2, Sheffield United 1. It is Blackpool 2, Blackburn Rovers 1, Birmingham 0, Nottingham Forest 3, Barnsley 0, Millwall 0 is the latest. We had this Ireland Thinks poll during the week that was exclusively revealed to OTB Sports, that 80% of the Irish public, taking out the don't knows and those who don't have any interest in football, are in support of Stephen Kenny managing Ireland for the European Championship qualifiers. 20% want a new manager. 1,000 people surveyed by Ireland Thinks. And we've got a game next Saturday in Azerbaijan, Dan. I suppose the squad was announced during the week. We're in no excuses territory. We need to win the game, hook or by crook. The public are in support of the manager, but we do need to see a win.
Definitely. I will just say before we go to that, James Ward-Prowse has now just been sent off for Southampton, JD. There was a big, long VAR sort of viewing of a challenge on Jorginho, and it looks quite inconclusive initially, but he's been sent off. But anyway, like it is sort of borderline no excuses territory, that's for sure. I mean, like the problem that Stephen Kenny has, he doesn't have the credit in the bank from a couple of wins earlier in his tenure, that as a result, like if they'd done the business in home games, I think there would be a degree of understanding that maybe, yes, there might be games on the road against these teams that will sometimes be tricky, but the feeling now is that they have to win, and that's the challenge that they've left themselves with. So yeah, I mean, listen, Azerbaijan, I mean, they're okay, they're dogged enough. I mean, you look at their recent record; they don't lose by many goals, as much as they're a lowly seeded team. You know, they lost by 1 goal to Portugal. They lost by 1 goal to Serbia. They gave Serbia some problems in Baku previously. But again, it's a sort of a weird one, this game, because really it's like never has a game that almost mattered so little in the context of the group mattered so much, perhaps, from the perspective of one of the teams involved. And it's a big game for the players in the same way that every Ireland game is a big game. But it's also not like they're going into this game thinking this is a game we have to win to qualify or to get into the playoff or something. So you're going to learn a lot about the motivation of the group and how much they are together in the sense of being behind Stephen Kenny and wanting this project to work. And the build up to it, because it's a Saturday game, it'll be built up to across the week like a really big game, even if in actuality it's just sort of a dead rubber. So you named the squad on Thursday. Again, there wasn't a massive amount of talking points from it beyond the decision to call in Will Keane, Michael Keane's twin brother, who again is doing well in League One this season, and that is where we are. But in reality, I think with Seamus Coleman being out, Dara O'Shea being out, you're probably just looking at the stronger players in the Ireland squad to perform at a good level, and that's why someone like Jeff Hendrick coming back to form. You're hoping Matt Doherty can get back to the form from Portugal, even if he's he's not playing really in the serious games for Spurs. And you're looking at those players to produce, and then hopefully the young players come with them.
You been in Baku before, Dan?
I was there with the great Johnny Ward in 2009 with Jamie McGrath, actually. 2019. Sorry, Jesus. 2019. Time didn't fly that much. Watching Dundalk play against Qarabag. So Jamie McGrath, I vaguely recall a story where Jamie McGrath and another Dundalk player were getting photos taken on the promenade, and I think the police came up and broke up the thing. There was some rule on taking photographs in this public place or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, listen, it's a long way away. I mean, I think the team are travelling on Wednesday, so I think they're giving themselves plenty of time, to overcome any issues with sort of jet lag or anything like that. I mean, I think they'll be travelling in comfort, so I don't think that's going to be a concern. Temperature-wise, I was having a look at it. It'll be warm enough, but not sort of oppressive heat or anything like that. Maybe a bit unusual for October, but nothing that they're not used to. So that's an interesting place. I mean, it's opulent in its own way. I think the Baku that we see, it's on the Grand Prix circuit. It's on the Euros circuit this summer. It's hosted. It was the Chelsea Arsenal in the Europa League final a couple of years ago. They clearly have the kind of wealth that UEFA and other big organisations enjoy. But I'm not sure if it's necessarily the most authentic buzz. But it's a good city. I seem to recall Johnny Ward falling in with some questionable characters, and
that was only the Irish journalists.
Playing pool in some sort of dungeon somewhere against some locals, from what I recall. But it was a good time. Yeah. There's quite a few fans going. I think fans are able to travel again. JD, there might be some people listening to this who. Because fans weren't allowed to travel.
Planet Guides on OTB Football Saturday too.
They weren't allowed to go to Portugal, although a couple got in, but they are allowed to go to Baku. So I'm sort of aware of some Irish fans.
How much is the beer?
It's pretty cheap once you get over there. The cost, the travel for Baku, the expense for Baku is the flights. But once you're actually there, it's not particularly expensive. And there is a nice old town, but I think they are taking COVID reasonably seriously. So I think there's chat of a curfew, I think around midnight. So may not be a party central place. It's not that type of place, but it's a fascinating place to go and walk around. I don't know, Johnny, do you have any particular memories of it?
I remember I was actually playing pool at one stage. It was these Irish journalists, but it's a weird city. Like, cause I've been to Georgia, I've been to Iran, and the Azeris kind of would remind you more of Iranians than Georgians in terms of how they look. But it's just a showcase capital, JD. Really, it's, you know, you've this ridiculous Hilton hotel. I remember taking a photo. I went out for a walk, I think it was the day of the game, and I was around where the Grand Prix finishes, and this massive Hilton hotel in front of you, and this like absolute pile of dirt Lada was driving by, and it was just like, it seemed to sum up, like, it's essentially a poor country with a dictator who has a first lady who likes to shop. So there are all these shops in Baku, like you would get, like, it was more expensive than Dublin in many respects.
Fifth Avenue sort of stuff.
There's
Avenue. The Fifth Avenue section.
But it's all a complete show, and like the water, I mean, you definitely wouldn't be going for a swim. The water looked like it had all the residue of oil kind of befitting the Caspian Sea, but you can definitely tell a good flagpole is, and I think Baku had the tallest flagpole in the world, but it then was usurped, and I'm just looking this up now, it's now third behind Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, Dushanbe in Tajikistan, but honourably is actually ahead of Gyeongdong in North Korea. So there you go. And actually, just sorry, I should mention, Gavin Comiskey has an absolutely off the wall article today with Joe Kendrick, who played for Drogheda under Paul Doolan and ended up playing in Azerbaijan, but when he signed, immediately the coach left, and he was basically told, get out of the club, and he dug his heels in. And Dan's stuff about Jamie McGrath, it kind of chimes in with the experience Joe Kendrick had in a dictatorship, essentially.
53106, 80% support Kenny. What a load of nonsense. Where you come up with your figures? Well, this is a reputable poll. It's Ireland Thinks. They were doing polls in Afghanistan on migration. They surveyed 1,000 people across all ages, demographics, gender, and that's what they came up with. If they came up with the opposite, we'd say the opposite. So
yeah, it's interesting. I think the poll is interesting, JD.
People are questioning the validity of the poll. The poll, like, we don't have any agenda here. People might be pro Stephen Kenny as a manager and maybe not have an opinion about that as Chelsea score. And Timo Werner has got a goal now that's gone in 2-1 to Chelsea against Southampton. Maybe that James Ward-Prowse dismissal didn't help the Saints, but in the rain in London, Chelsea seemed to might have got the winner 2-1, 83 minutes in, James Ward-Prowse. That poll is legitimate. People, it's not a case of we're completely robotic here. We don't have opinions. Of course, we're going to have an opinion on Stephen Kenny and the progression of the team. Some of us have made the argument that maybe it might be a long-term game, might be a better thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if Ireland keep on losing games, the answer will be pretty clear, and that the FAI will have to act.
Yeah, I think the poll is interesting because I think, like, I spoke to a couple of people in the aftermath, and you know, some people expressing surprise at it. And I think sometimes, you know, you particularly maybe in the pandemic and all that comes with it, like your friend groups, like, it become an echo chamber, and you might have people who feel particularly strongly around you who feel the same way, and then you'll have like other groups that are very much like with Kenny. But to me, it's almost like, what is the view of the sort of the more passive floating voter as such, who I presume some of them, again, I know there was don't knows and don't cares reflected in that initial sample, but even of those who did care enough to give an answer, I mean, 80% is an interesting amount. It's a strong amount. And I have spoken to some people who, like, we talk about like pro Kenny and anti Kenny, and it becomes a referendum on the manager every time. But there are, like, you do sort of get the feeling sometimes that there are people who are somewhere in the middle, that they're not het up by the whole thing. Their whole life isn't revolving around their standpoint on this, but they get the sense that they've quite enjoyed watching some of the games. They quite enjoy watching some of the younger players, and they're not sort of tired of this yet. There's a difference between that and saying, this is definitely working, and, you know, give them the keys of the kingdom forever and all of that. But I do chat to some people who aren't like strongly down on one side, but they're sort of they're not of the sort of the trigger happy mindset that you have, that is so part of like the football discourse now, where we need to get rid of someone now and get a new manager in. I think with the national team, there are some people who, and this is commented on by people who went to the games in the Aviva, that there was a mood in the stadium that was reasonably supportive, bit of impatience at times, but broadly supportive. And to be honest, if the people who are paying to go to the games in the Aviva, if their attitude is reflected by that poll, if you know what I mean. If there's a feeling around the Qatar game and particularly the Portugal game in November that people are of that mindset, I think it'll help Kenny's prospects. But of course, like, you can't also go through a campaign without winning a game, you know, and that's obviously the issue he faces with these away games in Azerbaijan and Luxembourg. I think he can't lose any of them and needs to win at least one of them, I think.
And it's very briefly, JD, it's a different challenge. So in some respects it's easier to play Portugal than it is to play Azerbaijan, and that sounds ridiculous, but there's very little expectation in Faro, whereas our record under Kenny against the poor teams has not been good, and moreover our performances against teams
we can't score goals.
Yeah, so when I was very disappointed. As much as the Luxembourg game, I'd give us a bit of a pass there, but I was very disappointed in the Azerbaijan game at home because James McLean got more touches than any other player, and we basically ended up lumping the ball in the box for the last half an hour. It was very disappointing. So we need to have a lot more guile than that, and we need to have a measure of control in the game, because Azerbaijan, as much as they're not bad, we should be better than them, and Kenny's teams need to be able to beat inferior opposition. Forget about Andorra. We need to be beating teams like this, because our performances against teams better than us have been good. Our performances and results against teams inferior to us have not.
One of our texters has been in touch about Sean Maguire. Why is he not getting a look in?
Got injured again today. He's just come off. Kenny doesn't, I don't know, Dan, he doesn't really seem to be in the Maguire.
No, he doesn't. I mean, he started a couple of the games last winter or last sort of autumn, having not been in the initial squads. And yeah, I mean, their history goes back to Dundalk when Kenny had him in 2015, and then it didn't really work out, and he went to Cork and sort of tormented them for the next 2 seasons. But yeah, I mean, Maguire's had a long run, maybe not playing that much and not scoring, but he's had a bit of a revival in the last sort of 5-6 weeks or so. And it seems like he's been playing in the front too, and has been dropping deep and more so being a provider, a creator for the guy he has with him. I think he's a Danish striker. So maybe again in the position that he plays, like, he's not necessarily someone who's saying he's banging in the goals, and maybe does Kenny not see where he could fit him in. But there's certainly a case for him being in the squad, like particularly when he's talking about Will Keane maybe being more of a number 10 again and a link player. Maybe he's just not convinced about Maguire's role, but I think on form he's got a valid case, presuming though, of course, I mean, we'll see what this injury is, if he's in a bad case. I think Chelsea have just scored.
They have, yeah. It looks like Chilwell is in the middle of that ruck, but it is 3-1 now to Chelsea against Southampton at Stamford Bridge. James Ward-Prowse's dismissal really costing Southampton, with Timo Werner getting the second goal, and they were really on top there, and a bit of a ping pong in the box, and it went everywhere, and it seems like it's been given by the goal line technology, and it looks like it's Ben Chilwell. We'll just confirm that in a moment. Chelsea 3, Southampton 1. So the week has ended in a good way for Chelsea. In the end of it, just to let you know elsewhere, it is Burnley 0, Norwich 0, Leeds 1, Watford 0, and Wolves 2, Newcastle 1. And it is Ben Chilwell who's got that third goal for Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. 89 minutes on the watch. I got a text in here about from a United fan. Off the ball, in fairness to Ollie, he's completely transformed Man United from the way we used to play to now. He's definitely improved United, but there'll be always the hater out there who don't want to see United do well and will always be negative about Ollie and his team. Your so-called speakers on Off the Ball, United till I die, says Niall in Ballinasloe. Just on the FAI board, Dan, is there any kind of feeling from what your sources of what the feeling is about the manager?
Yeah, like there was obviously various. I suppose it seems there's an element of it might depend who you speak to some degree, because like I think in some areas there's real support for Kenny. Sort of, I think in others maybe there's a bit more on the fence about where it might go. Like and this is just my opinion as opposed to information. Like I think there's a real sense that they do want it to work out. I'm not sure if there's people there who say have a trigger happy sort of lust, you know, that just want change for the sake of change because that's what they want to do. I think there's a feeling that they would like it to work out, but reasonably enough, I can understand why some people would look at the run of results and express some concern. But I'm not sure if it's quite at the point where there would be enough people there to fully like force a change. But like that can change too, you know. Like I still think it's in Kenny's hands in the sense of, I think, you know, he can win people over by getting those wins that people can believe they're capable of wins. But I think that's sort of the higher level of the board. I think he would have maybe some of the more influential people. I think he would have very strong backing there. But clearly, the FAI board does now appear to be a democracy. So like there's sort of 12 people there who will all have their own standpoints on it. And
is it a majority vote, Dan?
Well, I don't think it's sort of as set in stone for these decisions. It's not like a motion at an AGM or something where you need 2/3 of something. I think like I don't know, like to get to a situation where you're voting on something, it almost feels like then things have reached a dark enough stage. But listen, you'd assume that's how it would work, but again, you would imagine that the input of certain people would carry a degree of weight. The CEO's report on things would be influential. I mean, you have someone like Packy Bonner there who'll have a role to play. I think there will be some people on the FAI board who wouldn't necessarily have a huge background in football. They're there for their acumen in other departments. So I'm not sure the extent to which they would suddenly start coming in and like, having a vote swung by a couple of those people. I'm not sure if that's what you want. So I think you'd imagine a functioning board would know people whose strengths are and allow them to sort of guide the discussion. But again, I think if results are okay over the next couple of windows, I think the vibes will be good for Kenny. But clearly, there's an if with that, and that's obviously a significant if.
Some text in here on 53106. Solskjaer on the audit board is like a marriage going nowhere, but either party is afraid to admit it. Meanwhile, the kids, for example, the players suffer in the long run. I think the players will be okay. Chelsea only seem to have started to play after Southampton had a player sent off. Chelsea should be playing for the full 90 minutes. And on the Kenny poll, I'm one of those who's not strongly pro or anti, but if sacking Kerr and bringing in Staunton tells us anything, if you want Kenny out, you better have a better choice in mind. I don't think I've heard a better option, says Michael, one of our texters on 53106. That's the thing. If there's going to be a change, you need to have somebody lined up.
Yeah, but it's not like we need to get away as well from the crude issue of who's managing the team. We need to look at much more at the structures of football in this country. How are we prepared for a life post Brexit where our kids have to be here or in other European countries? They're not going to Britain anymore. How are we coaching our kids at a young age? How are we making the League of Ireland a truly national league where there's a pyramid for every kid in every county in Ireland to play for his local team? These are all much, much bigger issues than who's managing the international team. And sometimes you feel like Kenny takes on the responsibility of almost like carrying Irish football into the next century, but he's only one part of the wheel, and we have a lot more issues than who's managing the Irish team. Let's be honest about that. And whether Kenny is there or not at the end of the Euros campaign isn't going to fix the fact that we've a League of Ireland where a lot of the grounds are nowhere near up to scratch. We don't have a truly national league in this country. We have structures that just haven't been put in place. We don't have enough government support for academies. And Stephen Kenny is not going to change that. We've far more issues than who's in charge of the Irish team.
OK, Johnny, thanks to you. And thanks to Dan on a remote there. And enjoy Baku, Dan.
Thank you.
And we'll chat to you next week as well from Azerbaijan. Just let you know about the Premier League, folks. Man United won, Everton won. It is finished. Latest scores going into the closing stages of the matches. Burnley 0, Norwich 0, Chelsea 3, Southampton 1. With a red card for Ward-Prowse, and Chilwell has made it 3 points for Chelsea. Leeds 1, Watford 0. It is finished. Wolves 2, Newcastle 1. So Steve Bruce, a man continually under heat. Coventry 4, Fulham 1 was a result from earlier in the Championship. Barnsley 0, Millwall 1 is a result as well. Latest scores: Birmingham 0, Nottingham Forest 3. Latest: Blackpool 2, Blackburn 1. Bournemouth 2, Sheffield United 1 is the latest. It is Cardiff 0, Reading 1. It is finished. Derby 0, Swansea 0. Latest: Hull 2, Middlesbrough 0. Finished: Luton 0, Huddersfield 0. Finished: Peterborough 2, Bristol City 3, and a latest score: QPR 3, Preston 2. And in Scotland it finished: Dundee United 1, Ross County 0, Hearts 2, Motherwell 0, Livingston 0, St Mirren 1, and a game that has gone full time: St Johnstone 3, Dundee FC 1. In the golf, John Murphy from Cork tied for second on 11 under par in the Dunhill Links in round 3. 3 shots off Danny Willett. Shane Larry also in a tie for second on 11 under par. Just to let you know, tomorrow, Off the Ball, back from 1 until 7, Joe Malloy in the chair. We're going to showcase 2 live and exclusive Premier League commentaries. First up, Spurs against Aston Villa. Bernard O'Toole and Brian Kerr will call that one. Then at one of the biggest games in world football, Liverpool versus Manchester City at Anfield. Nathan Murphy and Kenny Cunningham describing the action. Also the Sunday pay-per-view. Going to be a great show. Be sure and tune in. Chelsea have beaten Southampton by 3-1. If you missed the Saturday panel, reviewing the Sporting Week with Addison Miller, Michael Verney and Shane Keegan, or any of OTB Football Saturday with Mark Lawrenson, Dan McDonnell and Johnny Ward, you can find the podcasts of our content on the OTB Sports app. Search OTB Sports in your app store to download the app for iOS and Android, or listen back wherever you get your pods. Thanks so much for listening to us today. Speak soon. Bye-bye.